Right, hi. iPhone 12 mini. The iPhone 11 has been my favourite phone for a while now. It's so well refined that there's no real easy way for Apple to make it any better. And I think Apple know that about their entire iPhone lineup, so this is their solution. It's the 5.4-inch, palm-sized iPhone that is designed to be everything the regular iPhone 12 is, just smaller. And although everything feels brand new with this device, it is still the familiar iPhone we all know and love. Well, almost. Let me explain what I mean by that. Right before I say, if you're one of the 93% of people who aren't subscribed, let's change that because I guarantee you'll get some free cookies. Okay, you won't get cookies, but you'll get to watch my videos and surely that's a bit more fun. It's incredibly refreshing to use a device that actually feels different for once. The small body of the iPhone 12 mini feels great in the hand, mainly thanks to Apple's build quality. And despite being absolutely tiny compared to the iPhone 11, it's nice to hold and to use this phone. Now, I'll admit I'm the kind of person who loves a big phone. In fact, the iPhone 11 is actually the perfect size for me, so switching to the 12 mini wasn't something I expected to get along with. But I really have had a lot of fun using this phone. The new design introduced with the 12 is much more satisfying than I thought it would be. It's clean, with its non-curved edges, a perfectly flat display and rear glass. It's the refinement the iPhone needed to feel more precise and to look more perfected all around. If there's one thing that I'd change from this design, it would be the placement of that power button. When I'm holding the phone to use it, it feels fine where it is, but pulling the phone out of my pocket and going to turn it on, I keep finding myself reaching for the top of the phone for the power button, and I'll admit there is a part of me that wishes the power button was on the top of this phone and not on the side. It would have really brought out the nostalgia for it, but also, for me, with my slightly massive hands, it would have made sense. The display on the 12 mini is incredible. Apple upgraded the entire lineup to OLED this year, and it's a welcome change. This phone's 2340 by 1080 resolution looks great for the size, and much clearer and sharper than previous generations, just kind of like the rest of this phone actually feels. It's a bright display with a typical brightness of 625 nits and a peak of 1200, which means during the day any kind of situation is never going to be a problem. And colour representation, dynamic range, and the overall viewing experience for content consumption on this display is truly great. Plus, because it's an OLED panel, the bezels are much thinner than that of the iPhone 11's LCD panel, which adds to this phone's clean and premium looks, and makes a more effective use of the smaller surface area at the front. Although I'd love to say content consumption on this display is great, and don't get me wrong, that display itself is incredible, I just can't get used to actually watching YouTube or Netflix on this display. Because unless you're holding the phone relatively close to your face the whole time, it becomes a bit of a struggle to actually see what's going on. Sure, there's only a small difference between the size of the 12 and the 12 mini, but that's quite a big difference when it comes to watching Netflix in the background when you're not holding your phone the whole time. That being said, it's the only part of this device that I simply can't get used to. Everything else with this display is great. I can type, I can multitask, I can do everything productivity related on there and it's perfectly fine. Just when it comes to sitting down and watching something, I can't get used to it on a screen that small. For everything apart from content consumption, there is something really satisfying about a screen that is this small and just looks this damn good. Apple has apparently upgraded the cameras from the 11 with this phone, but it's still the same wide-angle and ultra-wide-angle pair on the back. This isn't the best arrangement for my personal use, as I always find the ultra-wide has too much distortion and is pretty limited in its actual usable use cases. Instead, I prefer a telephoto and a regular wide-angle camera, which is unfortunate because it's not really what this phone offers. I always find myself trying to get closer to a subject rather than further away and wider out. And it's because of that that I'm not always the happiest with these cameras. No matter what you think of these focal lengths, the colours are actually really nice. The photos have the typical iPhone style of a lot of everything in one, the detail levels are excellent, and overall these cameras are great, just like the iPhone 11's cameras. In fact, I find the photos to be almost completely indistinguishable between the 11 and the 12 mini. Sure, the white balance is slightly warmer on the 12 mini, but the images are basically identical in every other way. The biggest absence from the 12 mini's cameras is Pro RAW, Apple's headline camera feature that they reserved only for the 12 Pro models. Wow. This phone has no RAW photo support at all in the native camera app, and that's weird. It means that for photography, the cameras are no different to the iPhone 11 in terms of what they can actually do. Regardless of whether the color temperature is different, at the end of the day the photos look the same, and there's no discernible feature difference between the two phones. And that's disappointing, because realistically the only thing stopping this phone from having Pro RAW is software. There's no major hardware difference between the two variants of the 12, so holding this phone back really limits how good the camera experience is when you see other people posting their pro raw photos on Twitter or on Instagram, and you're stuck there with your 12 mini thinking, did I make the right choice? Now, all of that being said, shooting video in Dolby Vision HDR is just incredible for a phone this small. And if anything, it just accentuates the fact that iPhones are the most reliable for shooting great quality video without any issues. Seriously, filming video with this phone is so great, and the end result just looks so good with its details, its color accuracy, with everything in between, that I'm amazed. The size of this phone and the quality of the video just don't seem proportionate to each other. Despite what I expected, the experience with iOS is still identical on this phone as it is with every other iPhone out there. Although the A14 doesn't feel much faster than the A13 in most situations, it does have its snappier moments, particularly in loading up the camera app and intense multitasking. It's only minor, but there are definitely moments that the A14 feels faster, which I really didn't think was possible. iOS 14 suits this device really well. Despite its size, everything feels right. Nothing's been shrunk down carelessly, and it just feels like a perfect fit for this phone. Widgets, the app drawer, the control center, everything makes perfect sense with this phone, just like it does for every other iPhone. And that was one of my biggest worries going into this device, whether or not the software would actually suit it, or if it was just shrunk down too much and the end result would be just a bit of a mess. It's not. The software is just as seamless as it is on every other iPhone, and the experience is just one of simplicity. Navigating under my normal use case through multitasking and the quick switching of apps is incredibly smooth, and it feels perfectly refined on this phone. Things even feel a little easier in a way, as you don't have the same range of motion on the smaller screen for those navigation gestures. It's hard to describe everything Apple have done with this phone in one sentence. All I can say is that it's really, really well optimized for the hardware this phone has. For everyday use where you're not testing it to its limits, there is something so consistently awesome about the performance of this phone that it makes me just love iPhones even more. There's never been a single instance where animations hang, there's nothing in regard to lag or stuttering, everything just feels perfect, which is not really unexpected considering how good the A13 chip was. But there's a caveat to this. Although this phone's performance is incredible, there's one thing that suffers, and it's the battery life. Yes, the performance is incredible. It's beyond flawless and perfectly built around the size of this phone's display. But it's also clearly designed around a phone that has a battery capacity like that of the regular iPhone 12. And that's something that this phone doesn't have. The 2200 mAh battery just barely cuts it for my daily use, where my iPhone 11 can easily get me through the day or a day and a half if I'm really cautious. This phone instead gets me through just about a day of use, but doesn't give me any more than that. Where my iPhone 11 gives me flexibility to change my routine and not to worry about my phone dying, this phone doesn't do that to the same extent, and it's the biggest trade-off for that smaller size. I'm not exactly a power user, but neither is my use case extremely light. I'm kind of in the middle ground. And my experience has been just a bit disappointing with regard to battery life, considering just how much fun this phone is to use. It's just a shame it doesn't last long enough to be the perfect device for me. And I think the issue is that I've become so used to the great battery life on my iPhone 11 that switching to anything smaller than that just feels like a backward step. For you, this may not be the case, but it obviously depends on how you use your phone. I'm sharing my own experiences with you so you can see what your experience will be like if you're anything like me. And for me, the battery is the biggest letdown for an otherwise perfect phone. It's disappointing really. Even in the best conditions, the battery here can't keep up with the iPhone 12 or even the iPhone 11, my previous daily driver. This doesn't seem like a phone that's targeted at the power user who will use it to its limits non-stop every day. Instead, this feels like the phone that's built for everyone, the phone that can do everything you could possibly need without screaming and shouting about just how good it is. Although it's not perfect in every regard, the iPhone 12 mini really sells the idea of a little phone that can do a lot, even if the trade-off for having a smaller phone is not one that will suit everyone's needs. Being the cheapest of the new iPhones and almost like an SE that's actually worth buying, the iPhone 12 mini is one of the nicest phones I've used in a long time. And although it's still a little bit pricey, I can absolutely recommend this phone to anyone who enjoys the nostalgia effect of a smaller phone without sacrificing the experience of using the phone in daily life. And you can take it from me, you will have a lot of fun using this phone.